What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and today we got another special guest, Tony Goins. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Landon. How are you?
Doing fantastic.
And I'm not a special guest.
I'm
just your buddy.
You are. Yeah, you're more than absolutely, buddy, mentor. You're a lot of things to a lot of people, Tony, and I think that's why I definitely want to have you on here and just kind of unpack a little portion of your brain so we can share with the world about all the stuff that's going on in there. So, talk about like the origin story. What's kind of the comic book number one of Tony Goins, if you will. Where are you from, and what were you like as a kid?
Well, I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina. I was raised in a single-parent home. My mother, Laverne Goins, was an educator, 40 years, and I have two sisters, Robin and Phyllis, and I'm the oldest. As a kid, when you grow up in a single-family home, my dad was around. My mother and father just split early. I think as the oldest, you're forced into somewhat of leadership roles early in your life. So, at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age, I was having to carry out duties and responsibilities that, would normally be done by someone older. And so I had to learn how to, really support my mother and my sisters. And I got my first job was selling toilet bowl cleaners at 9. For a company called Barjo Chemical Company. Walter and Yvonne Johnson owned the company. And I learned the value of margin. Miss Johnson gave me a wagon. She told me that I could sell the toilet bowl cleaners for $1. And I did the math, and I knew that there were at least 2 bathrooms in each home in my neighborhood. And I kind of figured that I could get $3. She told me to sell them for $2. So anyway, I got my little wagon and I went around the neighborhood and I knocked on the door and I sold toilet bowl cleaners, and instead of selling it for $2, I sold it for $3. And I gave her money back, but I had double what I was supposed to make. And that was really my first job, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
Right into sales, just thrown right into it.
It's funny because a lot of times I don't remember that. But whenever I go home and I go visit Walter and Yvonne Johnson, I always remember Barjo. That was Barbie Johnson in the chemical company, and they gave me my first job.
Amazing.
I graduated from high school and joined the Marine Corps. I went in July of 1982 and served for 4 years. I was left as a sergeant. My MOS was that of what was called an 0331, which is a machine gunner. My daughter, Tony Goins Brockman, she was born when I was in high school. So I was a junior in high school when my child was born, and I became a father.
Grew up quick.
So it created a great deal of accountability and responsibility. I always share that story with a lot of pride because I know there are other teenage parents that are out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not shy about saying I was a teenage parent. Statistically, the numbers don't add up for any level of growth in life when you're a teenage parent. But I'm proud to say that, my daughter, Tony Goins Brockman, has grown up. She's become a wonderful young lady. She's married. She has 4 kids. She's given me 4 grandkids. And here in the next year, she will be Dr. Tony Goins Brockman. She'll finish her ED in leadership and business.
So what was that like? Talk about, I can't even imagine the social pressure that you must have been under when you were a kid. You're just a normal kid. You're a 17-year-old dude.
Yeah.
Just going through life in high school, and all of a sudden, you get some interesting news, right?
Yes. Well, that was really the impetus of my joining the Marine Corps. At that particular time, I had wrestling scholarships and academic scholarships. But at the end of the day, I was a father, and so I really had to find a way to take care of my daughter. And the Marine Corps offered me an opportunity to make sure that she was going to have insurance.
Yeah.
And it offered me an opportunity to make sure that she would be taken care of. And so I don't regret that decision. I don't regret my service to this country. But it was a journey, and it was an experience, and I truly feel that God took me through that experience so that I could share in order to help someone else that may be going through something very similar.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And so you go from now a really young father heading into the Marine Corps as a machine gunner.
Yes.
Talk about what that was like, getting indoctrinated into the Marine Corps. What was that like for you?
It was a shock to the system. You know, when you get off the bus at Paris Island and you are ordered to get on the yellow footprints, and there are drill instructors that will just completely change your mind and your mode of thinking. But what it teaches you is to get locked in and focused on mission, get locked in and focused on execution, and you understand the value of diversity and inclusion, because what you understand is that winning in talent is the headline. And when you have a group of diverse and inclusive leaders from all over the country, all races, all origins, and when you have the right level of alignment, it creates what I will tell you is the world's most feared fighting machine, the United States Marine Corps. That's the best example of what that does in the right environment. The training was intense. I could go on, but all Marines are aligned around Semper Fidelis, which means always faithful to God, corps, and the country. There's not one Marine that doesn't know what that means.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for your service and allowing us to do all this cool stuff. That's the way I look at it, is you guys do your job in the best way possible so we can all do ours. And I think that's what makes that really special. So thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you.
And so you go active duty right on the front lines. Am I right?
Well, you know, initially I went through what was called administrative assistant school, and that was just a school to kind of understand the support for the infantry. So I did that, and then I went to, and then I had a chance to go to recruiting duty.
Oh, okay. So you had a couple things before you were in infantry. Okay.
Yeah. So I went back to my hometown, and I got to recruit high school students from my high school to join the Marine Corps.
Selling again.
I was selling again.
Starting to see a path here.
Man, right? You know, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, I was a recruiter. I had the chance to go do that. And so for a year, I went to boot camp. I came back home. I worked in the local Marine Corps recruiting office, and I went to various high schools around the city, namely my own high school. So a lot of my friends, I'm still glad that they are my friends, because I recruited them to join the Marine Corps. So after a year and a half of that, I went back to Camp Lejeune and went through infantry training school, and then joined what was called the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, and that was an infantry unit stationed at Camp Lejeune.
Got it. Okay, and then you ended up going overseas as well. Right?
Yeah, I went all around the country and did my job.
Got it.
Yeah,
100%. So,
yes, sir.
And what year did you get out of the Marine Corps?
I got out October the 6th, 1986, and every Marine knows the day that they got out.
Yeah.
If a Marine tells you he does not know the day that he got out of Marine Corps, you need to question whether he was ever in.
Right.
Because you remember that date.
And it sounds like we talked a little bit before the podcast, but it sounds like, you know, you had a very specific memory, a really specific memory right when you got out, and kind of a shock to the system.
Yes.
And this show is, for anybody that's a new listener, this show is called Spark to Fire, which is basically where we understand and unpack what took your idea or a concept to a reality, or kind of like a tipping point moment where your entire life changed and you knew that you needed to make some drastic decisions to get on the path that you knew you needed to be on.
Sure.
And so talk about what it was like when you got out.
Well, my spark to fire moment, I kind of framed it a little differently off the camera. But when I left the Marine Corps, I couldn't find a job. I had been a machine gunner, and that's what I had on my resume. And so my grandmother, Mabel Davis, who was my heart, my life, she had made a contact at a firm called American Express. And American Express had opened a regional operational center in Greensboro. And she got an application for me, and I filled out the application, and I put on, the suit that I had at the time, which was, I remember, some gray slacks, a white short sleeve shirt, a gray tie, and a blue blazer.
I can see it now.
I roll up to American Express, and I'm ready to get a job. And the head of human resources said, well, since you did such a great job at guarding the country, you can guard this front desk. So they made me a security guard.
How'd you feel about that?
That was tough. That was tough, to go from being a sergeant in the Marine Corps and getting out and not being able to find a job and just being turned down. I couldn't get an interview with me. So I thank American Express for giving me an interview, and I thank them for at least giving me the opportunity to be a security guard.
Right.
And,
yeah, you had it.
They gave me a chance. They really did. Now, the pay was really, really low. And at the time I was married and had 2 kids, and my spark to fire moment, I think, was the first day that I put my security guard uniform on, and I'm standing at the front desk, and American Express was this huge campus, close to 5,000 to 6,000 people at one point would come through those doors a day, and I'm just standing there checking badges. So you go from the Marine Corps and I'm checking badges. And then the real spark to fire moment was when I got my paycheck. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it and I was clear that this was not going to be enough to take care of my family.
Yeah. And so what was the trajectory after that point? I think I know what happens next, but I'm really interested to see, like, how long did it take you to get to where your next step was, where you were working your way up the chain a little bit?
Well, I think the first thing I did was I had to go get a second job. Mm-hmm. And my second job was unloading trucks. And so I worked as a security guard, and I unloaded trucks at night just to make ends meet, to be able to take care of my family. But I did that for a year. And Malcolm Mitchell, who is still my friend and my mentor, he was a senior manager at American Express. And every day I would check his badge, and he would notice that even though I had a security guard uniform on, I kind of wore it in like a Marine would wear his uniform.
Yeah, right.
It was kind of tailored, and my shoes were polished. And one day he said to me, he said, "Listen, do you think you can do something else other than guard this front desk?" And I never forget, I said, "Malcolm, if you give me the opportunity, then I think I can do something different." So he took me to, he allowed me to shadow another credit authorizer, and 2 hours of shadowing that authorizer, I took very copious notes. And I remember walking into Malcolm's office, and I said, "Malcolm, if you give me a chance, I can do this job." And the next day he went down to Human Resources, and he said, "Listen, I'm going to interview and hire a security guard as a credit authorizer." Now, HR said to him, "You don't have the authority or the autonomy to do that." And he said, "Yes, I do."
And he hired you.
He did. He did. He changed my life.
Wow.
He changed. That is the single reason that I am committed and obligated to give back and do what Malcolm Mitchell did for me. Mm-hmm. If Malcolm Mitchell had not gave me that opportunity, and through the grace of God, I don't sit here right now. One man, one person. You can change the life of one person if you simply take the time and you're intentional about doing so. And that's what Malcolm did for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I completely agree with you. So you took that moment and you were given an opportunity and you weren't going to waste it.
Oh no.
You knew what to do next.
Spark and fire.
Right.
I was on fire.
You were on fire. You knew what to do next.
Yeah. And I always say, whenever someone gives you an opportunity, you better maximize that opportunity. Mm-hmm. I mean, back then, 1987, we didn't have laptops. I mean, there were large, clunky binders. Becoming a credit authorizer was a fairly technical job. Mm-hmm. And so at night, I would take those big binders home, and I would stay up, until 1 or 2, 3 in the morning, studying those binders just to come back to class the next day, prepared and ready to execute and to deliver results. And, I finished at the top of my class as a credit authorizer, and by the time I hit the floor, within 9 months, I was in the top percentile of performance in the entire department. And the promotions came really quick. Yeah, they came really quick.
And so, talk about where your next steps were from that point as you rose up through Amex.
10 years at Amex, from a security guard to a director in what was called consolidated operations, which was another technical job. I led 20 analysts in load leveling, call volume, and doing forecasts and analysis for 3 sites. And it was a site in Greensboro, the site in Phoenix, and the site in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I left Amex and followed Malcolm to QVC, which was my fun job. So I had a chance to meet George Foreman and Joan Rivers, and
awesome.
It was just,
that was a fun little thing.
3 years of cool job, and then I said, well, it's time to get back to real work. So I left QVC and went to a firm in Cleveland, Ohio, Key Bank. Had a strong showing at Key, and that was the first time I had to do a mass layoff because it was right around the .com burst.
Talk about that for a second. What was it like to deliver that news?
It was one of the tougher things I've had to do, because I mean, we really, myself, Sharice Smith, Maddie Jones, and Keisha, I mean, they were all my team, and we really built a very strong organization at Key. And early 2000, my boss at the time flew in from Seattle and said, we're gonna have to shut the organization down. So now you're talking 600 people you got to stand in front of and say, your job is done. And
600 people.
Yeah, and I remember praying about that and saying, you know, how am I going to deliver this message and deliver it in a way so that people still had hope. And so I called my team together, my executive team together, and the night before, and I said, listen, we're going to have to shut this site down tomorrow, and I'm going to deliver the message. But I don't want anybody holding your heads down. I want everybody to hold your heads up, because leadership is too much is given, much is required. And it's really easy to be a leader when things are going tough. But we have an obligation to these 600 people to make sure that they know just because they're losing their jobs, their lives are not over. And so the next day came, my teammates walked into the building and were directed to a conference room. And I remember standing at the podium, and I had 4 bottles of apple juice.
Why apple juice?
I don't know. I didn't have water, 4 bottles of apple juice. And I started to talk about the accomplishments that the team had made over the past 3 years. And I talked about that in synonymously with the Chicago Bulls winning championships.
Oh, cool. Right on. Just tied that back into it.
And I said, listen, we've won championships, and at the end of the day, this site is going to close. That's a fact. But I want you to know that I'm going to be vested in assisting each and every one of you in getting a job. And you will go to other organizations and you will make them better because of the things that you've learned here. And there was kind of a crescendo to my speech to them. Yeah. And they stood up and clapped. And
you gotta be kidding me. So you laid off 600 people in front of them.
Yes.
You're sitting on this podium.
Yeah.
And you say you no longer have jobs. And they clapped when you got done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you surprised?
I was.
Were you just like, oh wow, that went way better than
Man,
I
I'm
thought.
getting chills right now.
Yeah. It's so crazy because I've known you for a minute now, and I've never heard any of these stories. So this is interesting.
Al Coppola, who was my boss at the time, he was the head of the whole operation. He was my direct boss. He said in all of his years he had never seen a layoff and an applause in the same setting.
No, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at movies like The Big Short, you know, like when everything was obviously happening on Wall Street with the housing crisis, and obviously people are very upset. They're throwing papers as they're leaving. They're tossing their their boxes full of stuff. But you didn't get that response because you showed to be a true leader, and I think what's really important is you actually gave a shit about your employees.
You have to.
And that's the thing where I think in big, large corporations, I think people they have this perception that, just because it's a massive corporation, they don't care about their people, or, they're just a number, that sort of thing. But you made them feel like they weren't just a number. And
an exciting part about that happened in 2000. This is 2020. That's 20 years ago. Almost every last person that was in that operation, they're doing something really successful now. Sharice is with JP Morgan Chase. Maddie stayed at KeyBank. Keisha's with a great company. Melissa's a VP of they've all just gone on to do huge things.
That's so cool.
Everybody there, all of Fran, all the folks that I work with, that I had to lay them off, and they were my friends and I cared about them. They're all doing great things.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So talk about what happened next after
Ford Motor Company.
Ford Motor Company. What did you do there?
Well, I started off in Dearborn, Michigan. Ford moved me to Columbia, Maryland, Nashville, Tennessee, and then a startup site in Greenville, South Carolina, where I met my friend David Brown.
Oh, okay.
David is now the president of the Omaha Chamber. Mm-hmm. We initially met in Greenville in 2000. He was the president of the Greenville Chamber, and I was the head of the Ford operation in Greenville.
Wild.
So that was a lot of fun. 3 years there. We won some championships, had some great teams. I had great teammates there. And then to the Ford operation in Las Vegas, Nevada, which was the West Coast. So that was a great experience. I led a sales team and a lot of people, 1,500 people, and big portfolio. And Ford was a lot of fun. It was fun working for the Fords, as they would say. Mm-hmm. I only drove Ford products,
right?
And
you lived, eat, and breathe Ford.
Absolutely. I mean, you bled Ford blue.
Right.
I got to bleed Nebraska red now, but back then I bled Ford blue.
Right.
And then from there too, I went to a company called USAA in San Antonio, Texas. That was a great move for me because it allowed me to lead dual locations. And I talk about when you grow a business at scale, it's one thing to lead an organization where you have everybody that you can see every day in the same location.
Right.
But when you start to think about, now I got a team in San Antonio and a big operation in Phoenix, Arizona, and you have to make sure that you have the same culture and the same mission and vision and make sure everybody's aligned. I needed that skill set as a part of my business portfolio.
How did you go about creating culture in two locations when you can't be in two places at once?
Well, I think the main thing you have to do is you got to have leaders that are aligned leading both of those organizations, and you have a set of standardized policies, practices, and procedures, but you preach the fact that the values are synonymous with behaviors. And you have to have leaders in both of those organizations that really believe that, because they will dictate and influence the culture when you're leading multiple locations. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you have a statement that you always say, it's your behaviors drive your results. So you can what was that statement?
Beliefs drive your behaviors, and your behaviors drive your outcomes. So what you believe will be synonymous with the way you behave. And the way you behave will be synonymous with the outcomes that you have in your life, which is also synonymous with your results.
Right. Yeah, and they start to show after that
They
point.
do.
So you ended up, after USAA, you were managing, how many people are you managing or looking over at that
15,
time?
1,600 people
1,600
combined.
people.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then it was on to JP Morgan Chase.
JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah, this was 2010, still during the financial crisis. I was hired to lead global operations for the automotive and student business. So I had teams in Manila and Cebu, and a vendor team in Mexico, and teams across the United States. But I was, co-located between Dallas and New York at the time.
So you're living in both places, and I mean, you're probably living a pretty. How old are you at this time? At that time?
47.
You're 47 years old. You're living in two locations.
Yes.
You've got a family. You got kids. What's that like on you at that point?
Well, at that time, my kids were basically grown, and I was on my own.
Right.
Yeah, I had gone through a divorce, which happens. So it wasn't that difficult on me because, it was basically just me.
Right.
My grandkids were born, and so
Gotcha.
I would have a chance to move around and see them. But during that time period, it was just me. And so probably 4, 5, 6 times a year, I would go from New York to Tokyo, from Tokyo to Manila, Manila to Cebu.
Wow.
From Cebu, I would come back through South Korea, through Los Angeles, and back to New York or back to Dallas.
And so you're just bouncing around, and you're having these little moments of, when you're able to show face in Cebu for, say, maybe a week, 2 weeks.
Sure.
And what are you doing in that time when you're there? You're just,
interacting with the team, looking at business results, helping them, removing barriers for them so that they could do their jobs. Giving them tons of recognition for the jobs that they were doing. I mean, here are, folks in the Philippines who are just the kindest people that I've ever met in my life, but they're servicing citizens in the United States, and they're, doing so in a very noble, honorable manner. So it was always great for me to go to the Philippines and dress in a Filipino garb and spend time with my team there and support them in growing their business results and taking better care of customers and making sure we hit all of our financial numbers.
And so you're bouncing around between all of these locations for JP Morgan Chase, and opportunity calls again. And this seems to be a theme as well. A lot of opportunities. Are you headhunted out of most of these positions?
Yes.
People are just, we know Tony, we want Tony.
Yes. So Korn Ferry is the largest executive search firm. Spencer Stewart is another executive search firm. And so the next executive search firm was Russell Reynolds. And Russell Reynolds contacted me about a job. And I never forget, they said, listen, we think we got a great opportunity for you. They wanted to know my thoughts on my beliefs around the Second Amendment. And I said, well, I served in the Marine Corps. I believe that every law-abiding citizen has the right to bear arms. So we had to ask you that question because the firm is Cabela's. and they sell a lot of guns. And I said, well, what does Cabela's have to do with banking? And at the moment, they shared with me the world's foremost bank was one of the most profitable, fastest growing banks of its size in the country at the time. And they said, now the only downside to this job is the job is in Nebraska. They call Nebraska a downside.
They call Nebraska a downside.
They did.
So what went through your mind at that time when you're thinking about, you're living in a pretty cool place. I mean, you're living in New York, you're living in LA, you're flying to Cebu, you're doing all these, Manila, you're looking at all these different opportunities, all these different opportunities to travel. So then you get an opportunity to land in Nebraska, what most on the coast would consider a flyover state.
Sure.
So what do you do next?
In my head at the time, the interview here was just going to be a courtesy interview. I had no real intention on taking the job, but when I got here, I spent 3 days here with Kevin Wirtz and Sean Baker and Tommy Milner and Ralph Kastner and the whole Cabela's team, and I had a chance to meet people in the community. And I remember calling Kim saying, listen, this is something really special here in Nebraska. And she says, don't you tell me we're going to take the job. And I said, I am. So in August of 2014, I moved here to Lincoln, and it's been a wonderful journey.
What did it for you? Why? Like what was the moment where you're like, okay, I mean, obviously the opportunity had to be worth your time.
Sure, sure. It was a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. That's
it really
obvious.
was.
But what was kind of like the tipping point with that, where you're like, was it going downtown? Was it just interacting with the people? What did it for you? It
was really interacting with the people. I mean, my very first interview was at JTK. And so the food was great. I met Tyler Moore. I mean, he was a great guy, now a great friend.
Yeah.
I thought the rail yard was really cool. And Kevin drove me around the city, and then I had a chance to tour Omaha, and I just thought it was just a cool place. I mean, and the people were really nice. And so I felt like that I could learn a lot, and this would be a great place to live, and I'm glad I made that decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you end up at Cabela's.
Yeah.
What's your role there when you were at
I was
Cabela's?
a chief operating officer. So I led the operations, and there was a turn of events, and we had to sell that firm. So we sold Cabela's to Bass Pro, and we sold the bank to Capital One. And at that time, I left and started co-founded the Capital Cigar Lounge with my partner Austin Hillis, and started a consulting firm. And then subsequently, I had a wonderful opportunity to go work for Mark LeBaron and Bill Ellerby at Lincoln Industries, which is one of the coolest companies on the planet.
Why is that?
So much fun. Because of the culture. Bill Ellerby and Mark LeBaron and the team there, they treat their teammates with such dignity and such care. And it's not easy work.
No.
It's hard work, but
you're stamping metal, you're pouring
forms.
Man.
I mean, you're talking chrome plating metal for Harley Davidson and for some of the largest truck companies in the world. You're making bumpers and visors, and I mean, it's difficult work, but people stay there for a long time because of the culture, the way they're treated, and the amenities, and the clear direction and real leadership. Yeah. And
so you got an opportunity. So let's back up for a second. Cabela's sells to Bass Pro and Capital One.
Yes.
The banking portion sells to Capital One, and you go from being an executive with so much. You as an executive, you have so many different things at your fingertips.
Sure.
A lot of times you probably had assistants. A lot of times you had assistants, and I remember when I first met you. We'll go back into that story, but you had all of these different amenities as an executive, I'm sure, for all these firms.
Yeah.
And you go from that to small business land.
The most difficult thing I've ever done in my life.
So talk about that.
Is becoming an entrepreneur, because you just don't have the resources that you have when you work for a larger firm. I have the highest level of respect for every entrepreneur that I meet now, because you have to start something from nothing. You have to create paychecks. When you have people that work for you, you're accountable and responsible for not just them, but their families and their lives. And it's not an easy task.
No,
it's not an easy task. So,
that's part of the reason. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I started the show, is I wanted to highlight that, is the fact that, these are really special, genuine people, especially the entrepreneurs. They're out there taking risks that most people just wouldn't even dream of, and it seems like second nature to them.
Yeah, especially farmers.
Yeah,
They're the original entrepreneurs.
That's right. And both my grandparents and my dad, being the farmers that they are, that's where I learned all my work ethic. It's from those guys and them, and from my mom, and it's just the hospitality and the work ethic aspect that comes with farming is, I wouldn't trade it.
It's amazing.
That's what's really special, and it's really interesting because you didn't come from a farm, but you also at 9 years old, you were already out working, selling door to door. Arguably one of the hardest things to do is sell something door to door.
When you're a 9-year-old kid, they typically say yes.
Yeah, you're a pretty cute kid too. You're probably all right. But you probably got rejected a couple times. You had to figure out what that was like to hear no.
I did.
And I'm sure that really shaped you. And I did this kind of the same thing with Boy Scout popcorn. So I was a cute kid selling Boy Scout popcorn and making that happen, and eventually worked the way up to the Eagle Scout, just like the rest of my family, which is really cool.
Sure.
But where we were going with that is, you had all these resources as an executive, and they're taken away, and you're now in small business world. But there's one thing you kind of brushed over that I want to talk about.
Okay.
As you got out of Capital One, or excuse me, out of Cabela's.
Yes.
You went on a little bit of a trip. And and you accomplished something pretty insane that I don't think a lot of people necessarily know about.
Yeah. So my dear friend Steven Jackson, who, boy, I could talk about SJ for the whole show. Is just a wonderful person. He played 13 years in the NFL. I met him right before he was drafted at church in Las Vegas. But anyway, Steven retired, and one of his teammates, Chris Long, who just retired from the Philadelphia Eagles, started a foundation called Water Boys. And Water Boys is a foundation that builds wells for kids and the citizens of Tanzania, Africa, which is one of the countries where there has a really high death rate because they don't have clean water. And Chris Long's foundation decided to do something about that. So 6 NFL players and 6 military veterans climb Mount Kilimanjaro every year since 2013 and raise money to build wells for kids in Tanzania. And so I get a call from Steven, and he says, "Hey, I need you to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with me." And being a little challenged around geography, I just said yes. I didn't really think about where it was or what the challenge would be. I got home and shared it with my wife, Kim, and she had already done a little Google search, and wait a minute, this is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, and it's in Africa. And at the time I was 55, and so I'm like, whoa, now it's time to train. Yeah. And so, I got a personal trainer and a nutritionist, and I went to work, So for about 4 or 5 months, I hadn't trained that hard since the Marine Corps.
That's what I was going to ask. How did that feel to get back kind of into that that hard training?
It felt good. Yeah. It felt really good. So February of 2018, we flew to Tanzania, Africa. We touched down. It was a lot of ceremonies, and we had a chance to visit the school that the well was going to benefit. We had a chance to see those kids drinking dirty water out of a creek. And we've visited the villages that had a well, and we saw how that well changed the lives of those villagers. Right. And so that was really the motivation to say, okay, let's get up this mountain. And so we started the climb. Climb should normally, for acclimation purposes, take about 7, 8, 9, 10 days. We did it in 4.5 days. And so when we got to the top, from the time it took us to get to the top all the way down to 15,000 square feet, and then ultimately to 9,000 feet, I think my Fitbit hit about 61,000 steps in that 1 day period of time. Oh my God. And I lost about 17 or 18 pounds. And
unbelievable.
Yeah, it was intense.
But you made it.
Yeah,
I remember when you told me about it the first time. You were in a meeting. I think you were in a meeting somewhere, and talk about that, because I think you answered the call while you're in the middle of like a really important meeting.
I did.
Yeah. What was that like?
Well, Jack, when Steven calls, and I try to pick up. I try to pick up when anybody calls, but Steven doesn't call me that much, so I figured it was kind of something important, and it really was important. So yeah, I answered the call, got in shape, and I was the last one to make it to the top, and I wouldn't have made it if it hadn't been from the motivation of my teammates and Steven standing beside me and walking beside me all the way up. And so the NFL channel filmed it. And so if you YouTube it, you'll see it. It's out there. It's called, oh boy, it All the Way Up is the title of it. Yeah. And I started chanting that all the way up. And it was pretty cool.
That is cool.
But it was for the kids. It was for the citizens of Tanzania. And I encourage everyone to contribute to Water Boys. Do something greater than yourself.
Yeah, that's been kind of another theme that I've just picked up in the last like 30 minutes of this interview is everything is all self. You're a really selfless guy, and I think a lot of people look up to you for that reason, is the fact that you do everything in service of others. And the book, like servant leader, like when people talk about Tony and they talk about, I've heard people just talk about you in conversations, and a lot of time it's just he's a real servant leader. He really does this for everyone around him, and he values his network and he values his family and his friends above all money. And that's a sign of a special person. So it's really cool to hear these stories and hear everything that you've accomplished with this. And so you've gone from selling toilet bowl cleaners, is that what you said, toilet bowl cleaners at 9 years old to being a top executive at some of the largest companies in the entire world.
Sure.
Now in Lincoln, Nebraska, starting two small businesses at once.
Yeah, it's a learning experience. I mean, I will tell you, I've made a lot of mistakes. Just miscalculations and things that you never would think would happen. But I have the utmost respect for entrepreneurs and people that start small businesses. It is not easy to do, and man, I've had just such great support from friends, Jay Wilkerson at Firespring and Matt Plooster and a number of other people that have really kind of helped myself, Austin and Brylan and Jeff Fry, and just helped rally around us. Connie, she owns a consulting firm. She's an accountant. My friend Rodney Lindsay and Connie Edmonds, and I mean, just so many people have just kind of rallied around us, Echo Bell, and just really worked to try to help us get this thing in order.
Yeah.
It's been tough, but I mean, we're excited about the product that we've put out, the Capital Cigar Lounge. My teammates there are just wonderful, wonderful teammates that have done such a great job for us. And we exist for the greater good of the community, and we create many vacations for our friends. And we allow people to come in and cultivate business and cultivate relationships. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's special. And as all this is happening, you picked up another career at Lincoln Industries, and you get a call. Another call.
My goodness. I'm tired of calls.
No more calls. No more calls.
No, I got a call, and I didn't recognize the number. Of course, I didn't have this number in my contacts, but it was from Governor Pete Ricketts, who is the governor of the great state of Nebraska, and he left me a voicemail, and he says, "Listen, Tony, give me a call back. I got an idea." I said, "Man, the governor has an idea. I better call the governor back."
Yeah.
And so I call him back, and I was really floored and humbled by the fact that he asked me to join his team as the head of economic development for the state of Nebraska, and said what a humbling opportunity, and the fact that he would have that level of confidence in me to do such a large job and to serve the citizens. And I didn't say yes immediately. I did say, "Governor, I'm not a politician. I'm not a classically trained economic developer or real estate guy." And he said, "That's not what I want." He said, "I want you to be the chief salesperson for the state."
Yep.
And I said, "Well, let me talk to my wife and pray about it and have some conversations with a few confidants," which I did. And a few days later, I called him back and said I would take the job.
Yeah, and you're doing that, today. So talk about some initiatives you guys are really working towards right now, and something that is something you're really passionate about within this role as Director of Economic Development.
Yeah, I mean, we got to continue to look at growth, and that is creating higher paying jobs for our citizens, making sure that they have the opportunity to live their lives and not just pay bills and not work two jobs, but work one job and have a chance to spend time with their family. So higher paying jobs, capital projects, bringing more companies in, recruiting more people to come, and retention. I mean, when we think about our younger generation, we're being picked off by Chicago, Denver, Minneapolis, and Kansas City. So we've got to have a brain gain, as President Carter at the university said, not a brain drain. And so we are highly focused on retention of our young professionals and retention of companies that move here to Nebraska, stay here, grow here. Recruiting and retention equal net growth. So as a state, we've got to have more citizens, more companies in the state, get past that 2 million mark. Right now we're at 1.94 million citizens. We've also got to think about not just the jobs of the day, but the jobs of the future. Artificial intelligence, machine learning are all changing the landscape. So how do we create a pipeline of kids that will understand how to be able to operate in the workforce of the future? We've also got to really rebrand ourselves and think about our standing in the United States and make sure that we're on the radar, become the fly-to state, not the fly-over state. And that's really, really important. And the lever to be able to do that is to really break the state down into regions. So we have broken the state up into 14 regions. The regions really signify the differences in the economies and the people and the way we operate here in the state. And it allows us to attack growth by region and use methodologies that can be adopted across various regions without using a shotgun approach. But you create scorecards and you look at growth by region. At the end of the day, what you get is you get growth for the entire state. And then, of course, looking at housing inventories and making sure that we develop housing strategies that will meet the demand based on that growth.
Got it. And so you got a lot on your mind.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, that was a handful of things.
Yeah, that's the short version of it.
Right, that's the short version.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're coming up, and I'm sure you're in meetings all day talking about this stuff, and you're focusing on your different initiatives, and you obviously get top down direction as to what's most important, I'm sure. How do you go about affecting change in just one of those channels that you talked about? What's your approach specifically as Director of Economic Development, and how does that differ from maybe somebody in the past? Because I know you're really proud of like what the guys did in the past.
Oh yeah, Courtney and Dave Rippey and Kathy Lang and Richard Byer. I mean, they've all done a great job in terms of foundationally making economic development what it is. I mean, when you look at how this state has grown and yeah, we can grow more, but look at all the accomplishments. When you're talking Google and Facebook and Huddle and Bulu Box, I mean, all of the great accomplishments that have happened here in the state, have been because of entrepreneurship and innovation and real economic development. So I think, to build on what they've already done, it is going to be really to call on the business community. When I've seen real economic development, it hasn't been because it was led by the government. It's been because it was led by business leaders. I often talk about Charlotte, North Carolina, and Hugh McCall, who ran Nations Bank and did the acquisition of Bank of America, and Jerry Richardson, who ran Hardee's. And those guys rallied around and said, Charlotte, North Carolina is going to be the banking capital of the South. And it was business leaders, it was a business-led economic development, and that's what we have to have here. We need business leaders to step up and give these young college students internships, and not just one or two. Major internships to help train these young professionals, and then make sure that you hire them after the internship, because that will reduce the attrition, that will reduce them leaving the state, because you give them an internship, you give them part-time work during the school year, and you give them a job afterwards.
Right.
Not a job, a career.
Yeah, and help them find their calling, right?
And help them find their calling. Yeah. But it has to be led by the business community. State, government, chamber, city should just supplement it. But the business leaders in this community taking a more assertive role in economic development. And it's happening now, but it has to be more at a higher level and on a broader scale across the entire state.
So what's some exciting things specifically in Lincoln that you see coming down the pipeline? Anything specific that you want to talk about there that you're just like, this is going to happen and we're really pumped about it?
Well, there are a few things
that
but I think
probably got to keep them under wraps for the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Innovation Campus. I mean, we're really excited about President Ted Carter. We're really excited about Tim Clare and the Regents giving him that opportunity, and the partnership that you'll see between the university and the chamber and the city with Lyrian as our mayor. I mean, there are a lot of different parts of the city and the state, but I think you're going to see a real unification long term. Yeah. I mean, what I say at the end of the day, we all wear the same jersey.
Right.
And so I think you'll see us pull some levers and try to move this state forward.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting when you first told me when you got this position. I just said, like, so what are you going to do first? And you said, I'm going to go meet with everybody. I'm going to go. I'm going to go over the state and really get to know Nebraska.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the places you went to.
Man,
I mean, I had some small towns that were pretty close to my area, and I grew up in a town of 500 people. So
yeah, I went to Valentine, Nebraska, and Cody. My friend Tanya Storr hosted me in small town Nebraska, and so Cody, Valentine. Spent some time in North Platte and Broken Bow. Oh boy,
all over the
just
place.
all over the place.
Yeah.
Norfolk, which is such a great town. Wayne, Nebraska, West Point, St. Paul's,
just all over the place.
All over.
And
Mike Flood and the whole crew in Norfolk and that Northeast region, just very, very impressive. Yeah.
I think they're going to see a lot of growth there. And I remember you introducing me to a couple people. I think it was a director of economic development in Norfolk.
Sure. Yeah.
So, what are you seeing as give me an example of something that business owners can do today, other than like the internships? You said that on a statewide level. You know, what can they do? Is it just continue to innovate? I mean, what's something that like business owners on a statewide level can do to continue helping you do,
I think every business owner should, first and foremost, as I talked about, internships and creating the right cultures so that your teammates feel good about coming to work every day. Mm-hmm. I think that's number one. I think culture is number one. I don't think that, government should have to dictate culture. That's the responsibility and accountability of the business leader, the person running the business. I think it's number one. I think number two, review your technology platform, because at the end of the day, what you'll see is technology start to permeate everything that we do. And it's one of the reasons we're very focused on getting fiber to rural Nebraska, because fiber to greater Nebraska will help to create innovation hubs, work from home, and allow some of those smaller towns to grow because of fiber and connectivity. Mm-hmm. So I would say every business leader should review their technology roadmap and make sure that you do what's necessary. Maybe you're not leading, but you can't be lagging, because technology is a real lever that's going to help with productivity, and you can't avert it.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
You mentioned technology, you mentioned culture.
Yes.
And I was talking to Austin earlier a little bit about Austin, business partner at Capital, about how transparency is a huge part of culture. Transparency of customers, everything. Talk about that and how you came to that after being in the corporate world where there's probably not a ton of transparency in some cases. In some cases, it's wide open because there's so much money in the system. It's like people. They're not going to be like, oh, well, I need this much money because there's this much money coming in sales. Like talk about how that works in small business.
Well, I think some of the leaders that I've had a chance to interview, I've got a book coming out called Something in the Water.
I know. We're about
the
to get
story
to that
of Lincoln's founders and builders. And I've had a chance to interview some really great entrepreneurs in this city who have small businesses that have grown to very large businesses. And one of the things they talk about is transparency and really taking care of their teammates and making sure that their teammates really know what's going on with the firm. That builds a higher level of trust. It builds a higher level of people wanting to get behind your vision and your mission. And that really pays off during tough times. Almost every person that I interviewed in that book had a time that their business was really tough, but because they were so transparent and vulnerable, their team stayed with them and they came out stronger on the other side. And that's really where I started to digest the importance of transparency based on spending time with 20 entrepreneurs in the city that people will have a chance to read about in the book, Something in the Water.
Yeah, Something in the Water. Make sure you guys pick up a copy. What's the website that they should go to get that?
SomethingInTheWaterBook.com.
Got it. SomethingInTheWaterBook.com. Make sure you guys pick that up. I'm going to get a copy, probably like 10 copies, and give them to my friends too.
You should.
One of the things we like to talk about at the end of the show is your legacy, Tony.
Yes.
Your legacy right now in my mind, when I look at you, when I think of you, is all of the impact you've had on young entrepreneurs since you've came to the city of Lincoln. Like, I'm telling you, like my friend group, my core friend group specifically, when, you're brought up in conversation, it's immediately like, oh, I have a call with Tony or I have a meeting with Tony. And it's like, you wouldn't even dare of like interrupting whatever is going on in that meeting, because it's important and it's really going to impact that person. And that's something that I've found just more recently with, good friends of mine that are interacting with you, and as I get more opportunities to interact with you. So what do you want your legacy to be, for generations to come?
Well, I think first I want it to be known that being a good person, a good Christian, my faith, my love for God, not holier than thou, because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I want the story to be about a story of redemption, a story of my faith, and a story that I've worked hard to become a better person from a faith and a Christian standpoint. I think second, the importance of my family, my wife, Kim. I could do none of this without her. I mean, I could talk about her for this whole show, but she's just been such a rock for me. My children, my oldest daughter, Tony, who is now married and has 4 kids, her husband, Anthony Brockman. My grandchildren, oh my goodness, Jalen, Jada, Jaya, and Journey. They're just my heart. And then my son, Anthony, the second, who is assistant basketball coach at Clemson, and his wife, Dr. Stephanie Goins, and my little grandbaby, my grandbaby number 5, little Reese. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter, Brianna, who is just the sweetest soul on the planet, and gets up every day wanting to help folks. And my baby, Jayla, who is a freshman at UDC. You will hear a lot about her as she continues to grow and change the world in her own ways. So my family, I want at some point in time, that my family can watch this and know how much I really love them. And then last but not least, my friends and my business constituents and the community, I think service is the highest calling. And I will always say that to whom much is given, much shall be required. And that if you live your life in a selfless manner, take the high road. Everything's not going to be hunky-dory. There's going to be some challenges, but you take the high road, and I believe that things come out on the other side. And then, I mentioned my friends, man. I mean, my relationship with Steven Jackson, he is just, we always say iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. And he is like a son to me and a friend to me. And so he has been such a really important part of my life. And so I could go on and on. My pastor, Simi Richard. But I want my legacy to be that I cared about people. Mm-hmm. And I try to make things better every day.
That's what's going to be written on the gravestone, Tony cared about people more than himself. And I think that's, you're living that. And so it's going to be really cool for you to meet that. I'm a believer in that, when you die and you go to heaven, you get an opportunity to meet the man or woman that you could have became. Sure. And I think that, from what you just described to me, you're spot on with that right now. So you got a lot of life to live, and you got a ton of more business.
I plan to be around.
You got a ton of more businesses to start.
110 years old.
Yeah,
110.
I think you'll make it.
Yeah, I can make it at 110.
I think you'll do it easily with ease. And that's an incredible stopping point. Dude, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Your insight. I guarantee I'm gonna have you on again, just because we got so much more business stuff to get into. But thank you seriously for doing this. I appreciate you and your mentorship with me. I'll never forget the time, and I don't know if you know this, but I remember the time when you called my cell phone, and I know who you were. I mean, I met you for like half a second in Eric Sullivan's office.
Yeah.
And he had made the introduction, and then it was like 3 or 4 weeks later, you called me, and I was living in this just complete shit apartment, and like just a really just junky place. There was cockroaches crawling on the walls. Like it was like it was early stage business. Like
sure.
I had to, I really had to scrap to kind of make the business work in the first early stages.
Yeah.
And I remember getting this call from you, and it was like a light at the end of the tunnel, dude. I just remember you're just like, Landon, I got this gig in Omaha.
That's right.
And it's tomorrow morning.
It's tomorrow morning. That's
8 o'clock.
right. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I thought you were going to sing your crew. I thought you had a crew.
Yeah.
And you showed up.
And I showed up, and I did have a couple people at that time, but I just remember how much that, just that opportunity meant for one,
Wow.
and then what the money from that opportunity meant to keep the business alive and keep the business going, because and I didn't tell you that, but
wow.
What it actually meant. And that's when it goes back to like, if you put people first and you put
sure.
businesses, and you put money and all that stuff second, good things are gonna happen to you, and what goes around comes around.
That's
I truly believe that. So I think that was a cool story, because I just remember having this thought of like, I gotta get the hell out of this apartment, and I get this call, and it was you, and that was I think that's why the bond was so special there for us. So
yeah.
I appreciate that a lot. I really
Absolutely.
do. So guys, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of Spark to Fire. Thank you so much for your time and attention and listening. You can find us at Spark to Fire on all the major platforms. And as usual, keep striking.